Today, we're joined by someone whose story truly embodies what Unwritten Records is all about, Francisco Fierro. I had the pleasure of meeting and working with Francisco as part of a large project that he was the project managing about 2 years ago. His transparency, eagerness to get things done in an efficient and correct manner, and kind sense of humor made for a great team. He coined the term coffee and plumb bobs and turned that phrase into a successful platform for the team to share moments of safety, quality assurance, and talk to other professionals about anything that was bothering them. It was an open forum and the true spark of an idea that helped become this series. Unwritten Records is about getting surveyors together in a room and talking about the cool stories that we've had in our careers. One day, I hope we can have these hour lunches turn into events at conferences and meetings where we can have coffee and plum bobs ready for our great discussions. So I'm going to invite Francisco on right here, and let's start at the beginning. Let's be honest with us. How many plum bobs do you currently own, and how many do you pretend that you've never lost?
Well, let's start with the ones I pretend I've never lost. Must have been close to 30. I think I'm down to 4 now. I do have one that I used when we started the coffee and plum bobs. I'd always start like the plum bobs up. We could start the meeting now. This particular plum bob was given to me by my team in Peru. When we started, that's where the coffee and plum bobs initiated, was on that project. And at one time they had come to me and they gave me this plum bob. And I looked at them, and they all had their plum bobs and they put it on the table. And so I was like, okay, what's going on? And they said, well, he says, the thing about it is we're not just surveyors in Peru, we're world surveyors. And how we tie ourselves with everyone throughout the world, all surveyors throughout the world, is the plumb bob. Every surveyor that comes in, works in the field, one of the first tools that they're going to be given and taught is how to use the plumb bob. And if you think of all the ancient tools and ancient instruments that have been used, there is an older instrument, but it's no longer used. However, the one that's still being used today is the plumb bob. You can date it back before the pyramids, and of all the technology that has risen up in this industry, the plumb bob has stayed true to itself. It is not developed. It is been the mainstay of what we do as far as measurements. And in a sense, you can consider that to be a true witness of our profession and a true witness of our development in survey. So when they gave that to me, I thought that was just one of the most inspiring things I'd ever heard. Wow, everybody can be tied to that plumb bob to be a surveyor. So that's how the term coffee and plumb bobs had come about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I actually didn't know that myself, so that's very cool. And one more question on that too. Take us back to the first day that you did hold a plumb bob, and what kind of dreams did that kid have?
Oh, I was 8 years old. My dad was a construction surveyor, and it was a weekend job we had to do. And somebody sent me a text. What's a plumb bob? This is a plumb bob. If you don't know what to do with it, you use it for measurement on uneven when you're dealing with uneven ground. Use that with your tape measure. Get the right kind of measurement so that you don't have to sit there and work all the hills and the uneven surfaces. But going back to your question, I was 8 years old. It was the first time I held a plumb bob. My dad spent about 3-4 hours on how to properly hold one. And there was, in fact, an art to it, especially when you're pulling chain or pulling tape. He's how to handle that tape. If you got it and it's bent, it's not going to work. If you got your thumb over, you got your finger that's leaking over the other end of that tape measure, it's going to push out the plumb line out of and give the wrong kind of measurement. So there was a whole unique process on how to properly hold a plumb bob, how to hold it steady. He even remember during that time he even showed me how how to work a plumb bob in high wind and keep it steady. Um, and in those times, we didn't have total stations. We had transits, and you set over a point with a plumb bob. So that's when it all started for me. That was the first tool I had.
So you've spent a lot of time in the field.
Yes.
What lessons from those years still ground you to today?
Integrity is one of them. Numbers don't lie. Measurements don't lie. You can try to hide things, you can try to shortcut things, but ultimately it's going to come out in the wash. And if they're going to build to it, it's going to come out. And next thing you know, either you or somebody else is going to come back and check your work and find, yeah, there was something wrong. So integrity, if you see, we learned I learned if I did something wrong or I held something wrong, I held myself accountable for it. Let them know, hey, yeah, I don't think I did this right. And we didn't, redid to make sure we did a QC check to make sure that it was done right or correct it if we needed to. That was a big thing. The other thing is understanding the people around you. Early on, I worked with my dad for 20 years. And one of the big things that I always took away from him, he said, oh, there was quite a few, but this one in particular was he would tell me everyone that draws breath in this world and comes across your path, whether you're going to work for them, whether they're going to work with you, or someday they're going to work for you, and everyone else included, everyone is 10 times more intelligent than you will ever give them credit for. So if you appeal to that acumen, if you treat them with that intelligence, then you're going to get a lot more uh, information and cooperation with them, and you're going to get things working in the right direction. So don't he always would say that 10 times more intelligence. Don't think they're dumb because they're a lot smarter than you think. So play to that.
We teased on the intro website that your career has taken you around the world, but how did you get there? After working with your dad, how did it get you to where you are today? You've kind of mentioned
Oh,
that, but expand a little bit.
so after about 20 years with my dad, I decided I needed his legend and his shadow was just massive in western Texas, southern New Mexico, all the way into southern Arizona. There was one time he had to do a resume because they needed his help in Dallas, and he didn't know what a resume was, so we had to help him with that. Found out he had worked on 273 bridges. Yeah. So I left and I ended up in St. Louis, Missouri. And I remember the interview I had there. Um, I was interviewing with the senior engineering manager, and the project manager had come in, and he grabbed my resume. Just he was going to go have a beer with the engineering manager, so he's just waiting for the interview to finish up. So in the meantime, he was reading my resume, and he looked at me and he said, "Fierro." I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "From El Paso." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You wouldn't be happen to be related to a Kiko Fierro?" And I said, "Yes, sir. That's my dad." And he said, "I'll be damned." And apparently when he started fresh out of college, he went and worked for a company, and they placed him under my dad and worked for my dad for about 8 months. He said he learned more in those 8 months than he did in the 4 years that he in college. And he looked at me and he said, what are you doing way out here? And I said, well, I was trying to get out from underneath my dad's shadow. Apparently I didn't go out far enough. And He said, "Are you half as good as your dad?" I said, "I like to think so." And he says, "So you want to make a name for yourself?" I said, "Yeah, you can start here." And it was in the St. Louis project, Weldon Springs Site Remedial Action Project. It was a $13 billion project of a radiation removal site. I mean, we literally drained lakes for the cleanup. But I started there and started building on my own career, my own name. Later on, I was getting picked up, ended up becoming the senior construction manager for the foundation package of the Busch Stadium, Cardinal Stadium. So I did that, and then another company had picked me up, and they were utilizing me. I was working on about 3 or 4 projects in St. Louis, but then they started utilizing me as a consultant to help troubleshoot on projects throughout the country. It was Shaw was a company. Um, and then they ended up sending me down to Colorado for a 750 megawatt power plant. So, and that was interesting because I took over. I didn't take over surveyors. They crowded up a whole mess of carpenters and wanted me to make them surveyors. So that was interesting. They listened. They did a great job for me. We ended up putting 200. There was the steam turbine generator that had 273 bolts that had to be placed, and the tolerance was plus or minus 5 millimeters. So when we did that, not a single bolt was rubbing the holes when we ended up setting it down. So they did a wonderful job, and we did a lot of old school type methods to make that happen. And at that point, a good friend of mine who became my mentor early on called me from for Bechtel, and he said, "How would you like to go to Africa?" And that's when it all began. Um, with them, I got to work in Africa. I got to work in Peru, in Australia, Bahrain. Um, got to do some stuff in Mexico early on before that. And also, when I was with Washington Group, I got sent for a few months to the Sakhalin Islands, which is north of Japan as well.
So was that the first moment that hit you that what you could do really took you around or could take you around the world?
Yes, that was the first time I was scared. I was nervous. Um, I didn't know what to expect. I'd never traveled like that before. When I got there, it was a great experience. You know, it's especially I think Africa and Peru were my 2 favorite places, simply because the people that were placed under me so they were so encouraged to want to learn. They wanted to pick it up. They wanted to be better than what they were before. They wanted to make their life better. And they knew if they learned more, if they developed themselves, that would happen. And so we did everything we could to create the environment to allow them to do develop and grow.
Well, fantastic. So I kind of want to take a quick stop over a couple of those places that you mentioned. And if you could
Okay.
give me a minute or two about a little bit of background of that place. And I've got a kind of a leading question for that as well. So let's begin in Angola. And so what did working in Angola teach you about communication that you still use today?
The thing I learned about there is with regards to communication is there's a difference. Everyone knows there's a difference between hearing and listening, but a lot of people don't realize that there's a difference between listening and witnessing, right? It goes a little deeper. So Angola, I was the only English as a first language speaker, and I was managing a team. It counted out at peak, we were 128 surveyors. 70% had to be local Angolans. And the thing that I learned with there is I had teams from China, from Japan, from Korea, from Portugal, Italy, Spain, and then the Philippines were my main surveyors or my direct surveyors. These other ones were subs, but I had to manage them as well. And then again, 70% were Angolan, and their language is Portuguese. So there was a big this communication breakdown that had to happen. And we were able to get some interpreters that helped, and some of the guys, were bilingual, knew a little bit of English, so we were able to work with that. And I'm not great Spanish, but I know enough Spanish that I was able to communicate with the Portuguese. So it was great. I was learning Tagalog from my Filipino surveyors. But that what I learned about communication is the greatest communication tool that you can have. And people will say it, but I actually in real time got to learn it, is that your greatest communication tool is actually listening. Right. And then when you go from listening to witnessing, and I'll give you an example of that, is I knew my Angolans didn't know how to survey. And so I would listen to where they were struggling. I would get with my teams to kind of help teach them. But at one point, I had to have a couple of carpenters because, there's no survey, any place where we can get laths or hubs. So we had to make them ourselves. So I had a couple of carpenters, got a saw table, and, got all the carpenter tools. And my whole group there had never seen a power tool before in their life. I pressed a drill and they got scared. They thought something was going to happen. So that's when I realized, I was like, okay, wait a minute. You guys never seen this. No, no, boss, we've never seen. And so I went a little further and I asked them, well, what do you know? And one of my guys raised his hand. He was 18 years old. He said, I know how to change an M60 blindfolded. And I was like, I said, were you a soldier? And I realized that when I had entered Angola, they had just finished their 27-year civil war. And all these workers, the oldest one I had was 21, and all of them, every single one of them, man, woman, were all child soldiers since they were 8, 9, 10 years old. And they were incredibly eager to want to learn to do something. They were so happy that they're not fighting anymore. But that's all they knew. They knew war, and they knew how to clean and change out their M60s. So I witnessed what was actually happening and what was evolving with the team, and got with my immediate team, my Filipino surveyors, and got with some of the other groups, and we established a school for them, and we started teaching them Survey 101. Had a good friend of mine, God rest his soul, Norman Brown. He taught at a local university in St. Louis. He sent me the curriculum for the Survey 101 survey, and we started teaching them. We started, once a week we'd have this class, and each week one of my different surveyors would teach the class, and the rest of us would sit there and walk by, and we'd mentor and help them out through it. So communication wise, I think the biggest thing I learned there is to listen. Even if you can't communicate, if you don't know the language, if you can listen and you can go beyond that and start witnessing what it is he's trying to portray here and go behind that, then you're going to start learning where you can lead them and where you can help them move and grow. Sorry, that's a little longer, 2 minutes.
No, that's okay. That's a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing. Let's jump to Peru. You talked about learning organization the hard way. So what happened on that project that made organization such a defining lesson?
Oh, that was tough. So that one is probably the largest set of surveyors I had. At peak, we had 178 surveyors. 14 were office CAD surveyors. We had in three different, 1, 2, three different locations throughout the project, the conveyor system itself. So, and it was a mine. We were building facilities for a copper mine, above ground copper mine. So we had the main place was a concentrator, which was massive. And then we had the conveyor system to the crusher, which was 50 miles from the concentrator. So we had 50 miles of, mountainous terrain. We were at the base camp was 14,000 feet above sea level. So we were in the Andes. Um, we had surveyors everywhere, and our survey work request system, we were averaging about a little over 200 survey work requests per week. And the goal and what we pushed for was that from once we start uh, that job, so from field to finish, we had to get it done within 48 hours or earlier. So from field to deliverable, we had to move fast. So that organization, so I knew that we're not going to do this, but just by flying off the seat of our pants. So I started moving towards communicating, not just with my team, but communicating with our immediate clients, which were the construction folks, the engineers, on establishing a stronger, more robust schedule and planning for survey. And it was it was a struggle, and it was a little bit of a fight, but we were able to push through it. And one of the things, as far as learning to organize, I ended up getting with each of these areas. I had two survey area leads, which are like chief of parties, I guess you could put, or coordinators. And then, of course, we had our office senior surveyor, and we had our leads and deputy leads and survey manager, um, all trying to work together, all trying to make things happen, all trying to organize a system where we can take on that amount of task, and not just take on and get it done and get it complete, but to ensure that the quality that we're providing that will not incur rework, right? And at the same time, with the construction side like that, of course, the priority is the safety. So we had to really consider how we were working safe. We had to consider how we were approaching our jobs. We had to consider how we were establishing our priorities. And it wasn't just, the overall schedule, the priority, but each area, had, okay, these are all the priorities. And then each crew chief had his load of work. And so when we worked that, and we had, and we all started understanding this is going to take this long, this long. So they knew how long it needed to take to get things done. And one of the big things that we did is we tracked our constraints. We tracked our impacts. Yeah, and you've seen this, Parker. You've seen when we did this on the SUG project. Those monthly, I'd show the impacts that we were running into, and what did we do? We collectively we sat there and we said, okay, how do we work these? How do we mitigate those? And one of the things that even then I explained as we did in the SUG is these impacts are our impacts. It doesn't matter if it's something externally caused it, but it's ours. How do we handle it? Keep the ball in our court. And that's the whole thing about accountability too, is if you don't hold yourself accountable, then you pass the ball to somebody else to fix it for you. If you hold yourself accountable to it, and maybe it's not completely your fault, but you keep the ball in your court, then you get to fix it. Right? You get to change it. You get to make it better. Right? So, but as far as, learning about organization, it was a lot about not only learning how to plan what needs to be done to be more effective and more efficient, it was also about the processes to ensure that when we give those deliverables, it's not going to incur rework. So those quality steps had to be in place. We had to organize with all the teams in all the areas how we were able to work and march to the same cadence. so that if we have to pull somebody from one area into another area to fill a spot, that learning curve is not going to be there. They're ready to go. They're ready to go, ready to move, and it's like we never slow down. And by doing that, I had to get with my leadership teams, and we had to really go through and discuss the best practices or the best approaches on how we're going to attack uh, any issues. And the other thing was the big thing takeaway, I think, with that team, with that leadership team was we didn't we didn't hone in on the problem. Instead, we just started working the solutions.
Yeah, well, thank you. I know that you've bounced around a couple other places too, so in the extended cut of this interview, we'll definitely get to those other places.
Okay.
Um, every country has such a great story, and I hope to share that with people as well. I'd like to transition our conversation a little bit into how your experiences have translated into the next generation of surveyors and how we can uplift our next group of people coming in. So, my first question for you is going to be, what advice would you give young surveyors about mastering the craft, not just the tasks, but the why behind how and why projects are done?
So mastering the craft. It all begins with your own leadership, right? Being an authentic leader, a leader of one. You learn everything that you can learn. Don't wait for somebody to teach you. If somebody's not teaching you, go find somebody there who knows what they're doing and ask them, hey, how do I do this? How do I get involved? Educate yourself, grow in that, and don't just educate, just, oh yeah, I know this. Go practice it, right? You have so many mentors out there. And I can say um, a lot of there's some folks here that are PLSs. If you ask them to teach you something, they're going to teach you something. They'll be more than happy to do that. That's the whole thing about, and that's what I like so much, or I love so much about the survey industry, is those who have mastered their skills are more than happy to mentor someone who's wanting to learn their skills. But if you want to learn that, if you want to be mentored, then take the initiative to be mentored. Take the initiative to to go to these people and say, "Hey, how do I learn this?" When you show that kind of initiative, that actually what is happening is you are inspiring that mentor. Because like, oh, okay, you want to get into this? Sure, I'll teach you. You know what I mean? It's easier. It's like the Angolans, right? The Angolans wanted to learn, so it was easier to teach them as opposed to somebody who's just going through the motions and doesn't have the ambition. Well, then you're probably not going to get too many mentors who are going to want to help you because of the fact that you don't have that drive or or that ambition to do so. Um, and that second part of the question, not just the task, but the why behind why the projects are done. The why between, the why is that when you're part of a team, right, that accountability falls with everybody in that team. It's not just you. If you fall, your whole team falls. If someone in your team falls, you fall with them. And so to get those projects done and to get them done right reflects, not just on your team, it reflects on you too. So if you're wondering what it's like to be a team member, well, you're in the right industry because that's what this is all about. Surveyors are all about a team. And when you have somebody there and you're being your brothers and sisters keeper and you guys work well together, then there's that sense of self-worth. You end up building that knowledge. You end up growing and finding that you are actually better today than you were yesterday. And the product that comes out of that can be something you can definitely be proud of.
You emphasize a lot of soft skills: communication, empathy, awareness. What's the most common soft skill gap that you see in early career surveyors?
Oh, well, that is, I'd have to say that all surveyors and in all positions, from the rodman all the way up to the vice president or director, right? The success of your career, the success of what you're going to do in your career is dependent on how you deal with people. 85% of that is going to be how you deal with people, how you handle your coworkers, how do you handle your managers, how you handle your clients. And so communication is strong. It has to be right. And it's not just communicating, it's your approaches to them, right? Um, that empathy, awareness, yes, I speak of all those, but it's basically you want to treat somebody the way you want to be treated. So if you treat somebody with respect, you're going to get respect. It's like an empty bucket, right? You're going to get out of it what you put into it. And with all the skills that you're learning and serving, with all the technology that's coming in, and you're learning that, and the processes and everything that you're learning, and if you're going to school, you're learning from your crew chief, or you're learning from your serving managers. It's dealing with people. You're still dealing with people. And the more you hone in on that craft, the more you're going to learn your own skills for your craft, as well as learning how to manage when you get it to those higher levels, because at some point you're going to have to, and the higher you go up in your career, the more you're going to be spending time dealing with people than you are dealing with your own craft.
So, action item: if a young surveyor wanted to build team trust starting today or tomorrow, what's one small immediate action that they could take?
Learn from each other, ask questions, ask what you don't know, have conversations about things that you're still learning on, right? Um, Also, these three great words: let me help. You know what's, and if you know what's going on, you don't wait to be asked. Go get it done. I had one kid in Corpus, 18 years old. He started learning how survey was working, so that when they go to a job and the crew chief's sitting there and he's getting straight up, he's looking at the drawings and this and that. By the time he's finished looking at the drawing, okay, let's get set up. Let's put it at the back. He's already got the backsides up. He had already started going to backsides. Didn't have to be asked. So the more um, the more initiative you put into it, you know, get in there, have that initiative. People are going to want you all the time, and they're going to want you to grow, and they're going to cheer you on for growing.
A quick quote from your book was lead from where they stand on. And so, how can young surveyors lead from where they stand on, even if they don't have a title yet, to feel comfortable in the room with their bosses and making feel like everyone is on an equal playing field?
You don't have leadership. Leadership is not a position. A position of authority. If you're a manager, you got moved up, the company moved you up for, chief of party, party chief, survey manager. Those are positions of authority. I said leadership is not a position. Leadership is having that ability to be influential so much that people trust you. And if people trust you, then you're a leader, right? Whether they follow you or they don't follow you, but they trust you enough that whatever it is that you're going to do, they're going to trust that. And if you're going to do it and they see, hey, this is great, they'll join you. And so early on as leadership, the best thing you can do is be a leader of one right now. I'm talking all the way to the chainman and the rodman. Be a leader of one. That's teaching yourself. That's learning from yourself. That's inspiring yourself to learn from those that are around you, to build yourself. You know, um, I would tell my teams on all these big projects, I say every time we go to a project, we're building four projects, not just one. You know, we're building the project we're working on, but you're also building a better you, and you're building a better company, and you're building a better client relationship. But it's the first thing, the most important thing is building a better you. And if you can learn to do that, then you are learning to become a leader of one. And to work with others, you have to show that, you show that respect. Again, in the empty bucket concept. You get out of it what you put into it.
You've now become a leader of many, not just one, and not just a manager of survey tasks, but managing people. So did you learn to take a step back and let subject matter experts handle the technical work while you focused on developing them and leading them?
So I think some people might have had, I'm not sure if anybody here has had the same effect I had. It was a hard transition for me at first. When I started moving up, it was, as a matter of fact, it was in Illinois. It was on the Olmsted Dam. And I'm jumping in there with the teams. I'm showing them how to work that TSC2. I'm giving them different ways on how we're going to have to do things. I'm doing all this. And then my project manager pulled me aside. He says, "You need to stop." And I was like, he goes, "You are not going to be the subject matter expert. Your job is to overlook and lead the subject matter experts. That's what they do. You can help them along, can give them advice, you can make strong suggestions." He goes, "But you're not you're not going to you're not going to do their job. You're going to let them do their job, and you're going to help them when they need you, and you're going to push out all the obstacles that are in their way." And it made me really take a different look at things, and he was my next great mentor, and it taught me about that, taught me that, the difference between managing and leading. You manage systems, you manage processes, you manage the deliverables, you manage the drawings, you manage things, you lead people. People are not things, people are not systems. They're dynamic, they're live. So you lead them. And one of the big things too, he had told me, he says, if you get your team and you put them in a room and you're the smartest one in the room, then you have not developed your people. You have not developed your teams. You can't be the smartest person in the room. You can't be that subject matter expert, because those are the ones that are out in the field getting the job done for you. And your job is to help them and support them. So that really changed everything for me.
Fantastic. I definitely want to leave some room in our discussion today about your book. And let's kind of jump into that real quick and summarize what we've talked about today. So ABCR, Attitude Based Culture Reformation. How did you get involved in writing? You're a career surveyor, you've been around the world. What pushed you to turn your ideas into a book, and tell us a little bit about what ABCR is all about?
So ABCR culture, attitude-based culture reformation, um, coming up from the bottom, coming up from the grind, I learned a lot about what happens at those levels, right? In the grassroots levels, getting the grind, and then you get bad managers, you get good managers, you see what works, you see what happens. I also had when I went to college, I was studying behavioral psychology too, so I always tapped into that, and it was great learning to see how people would react depending on what stimulus was given. But an opportunity came in 2017. Was on a project. I was actually sent to the project, and at that time, it was the most unsafe project in the company globally. And a project manager came in about the same time I did. There was a few senior managers that came in. We all came in around the same time. And he had said, if anybody has anything new, if anybody has any idea, because what we're doing is not working, it's not happening, people are getting hurt. So that gave me the challenge to put a lot of the thoughts and theories that I had into practice. And when we did that, that particular one, I wanted to make it more, I wanted to give the project more ownership of it. So I instead of calling it ABCR, we called it JCR, the Jiminy critical response, right? So when somebody was doing something, be doing something wrong, whether it's quality, whether it's safety, safety is always the easy one to catch, but they would say, hey, they'd correct them, they'd engage with them, they correct them, and they say, that's Jiminy. So we would reward people for that. And I started writing down how people were reacting to that, how people were actually kind of drawn to it. After a couple of years, I mean, we had on that project at peak, we were close to 6,000 people working on the job site, and 40% had been participating in it. And it was all volunteer. I mean, nobody was forced to do, anything. And I certainly wasn't using any kind of authority. So again, trying to influence um, without authority, being that culture leader. And I just cheered them on and we kept going. And so the results of that, the project manager wanted to get some KPI or wanted to get some metrics for it. We use the KPIs. So the safety manager at the time, we matched how the metrics that I had for the project with that JCR program against the safety KPI. And during that time frame, in 18 months, safety had dropped 70% on recordables, and we were down to one LTI in like 12 months. The productivity had increased by 40%. During that time frame. And sure enough, after those 18 months, it became the safest project. And it was also ENR Magazine's best project in the world. So from that, I developed a couple of theories on that. One being the surveyor, I call it the asthmas theory. So, and that's pretty much how where people are at, in the morale, or where they're at as far as development. It kind of gives you an idea of how to motivate, what tools you should use to help them motivate to move to the next part of that quadrant. And the other one was the vector theory, which I mentioned earlier, 4 vectors built. Um, And so when that happened, it really changed everything. And then it happened again on another project, and we did it again, and I called it the CCR. We called it the chat critical response, and did the same thing. In fact, it was even greater. We ended up having 80% of the workforce participating in it, and we more than tripled our productivity rate, and ended up with a million man hours without a lost time injury. So it's something that I know people want to, when you create that environment that allows people to practice their best values, their core values, then it's going to create a culture of strong core values. It's going to be a very healthy culture. And you're not going to lead that culture. You're going to follow it. And you're going to support it. You're going to nurture it because it's good culture, right? And you're going to see everything change. You're going to see productivity change. You're going to see the growth in your teams. You're going to see uh, the health of that culture.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that leadership isn't just one position. So who's this book for? If it's a leadership book, is it for everybody? And kind of lead us into maybe what's one thing that you want your target audience to get out of this.
So leadership it is for everybody, right? I think I mentioned earlier about being a leader of one, right? So if you're moving up in your career and you want to get up there and you want to be able to get to those positions where you get to be that director or that manager, why wait till then to start learning what leadership's about? When you were a rodman, you were already dealing with people. You were already learning how to conversate, how to be around people, the relationships that you need to create. So it's good to, as you're learning your skill and your craft, it's very good to also learn your skill on how to associate yourself with people, how to get the right approach to get positive responses with your people. And as you learn that, you learn about the people that are going to be under your purview as well, because you've been there. And so, I mean, it goes all the way from people down at the grassroots to, executives.
Great. Before we wrap up this section, we're going to shift into something that I'd like to call the surveyor soapbox. So it's a moment in the program where we step away from the structured questions and give our guests the floor a little bit. It's an open space for the speaker to share whatever they feel young surveyors need to hear the most. So whether it's a lesson, a challenge, a warning, a message they want to leave behind for the next generation. So it's essentially their chance to step on their soapbox and speak directly from experience. So your career has spanned global projects, toxic environments, high performing teams, leadership transformation, many other topics. When you look back, what legacy do you hope young surveyors take from your journey that you've shared?
There are surveyors all around the world. There are surveyors that you haven't met yet. And there are surveyors that you'll work for, and there are surveyors that will work for you, and you're going to learn from all of them if you keep yourself open to it. Don't be the smartest person in the room. Have the humility not to be, because pride removes the master from being the student. Humility allows the master to be the student and to teach the master.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing not just your story, but your lessons, your experiences, and your honesty about your career. It's exactly the kind of record that we're looking to preserve on this series. I'd like to open up the floor to questions for anybody that has any. Either put it in the chat box, or I think you're able to unmute your mic. So go ahead and do that if you care to. Teresa would like to know when we can purchase, or where and when you can purchase your book.
Oh, good question. So the pre-sale campaign starts on Monday, the 8th. I will post it on LinkedIn. The link for it. It goes for 5 weeks, from December 8th to January 9th. And in that page, you'll see the packages that are there, and there'll be some perks with it as well. Thank you for that question.
Jimmy's got a question. How do you approach large groups like the SUG program, knowing surveyors have big egos?
So good question. That's a great question. I dealt with the egos with my own humility. I knew that all of you guys in that SUG program, I mean, I'm dealing with survey directors, I'm dealing with survey managers. And don't short yourself, Jimmy, because you wowed me. I don't know how many times in those coffee and plum bobs. But I came with humility to make sure that everyone knew that I am not the smartest man in the room, that I was going to learn more from you than you were from me, and put myself in a position where what you need was going to be my priority. What you needed to move forward, what you needed to be able to deliver for the project was going to be my priority and was going to be my actions. And created that forum for that reason, because before that I was talking to each of you guys individually, and I said, well, let's just let's put all our heads in the room and solve this together. And so what happened is you had all these guys with big egos, but yet in that forum nobody had the ego. Everybody respected each other. Everybody respected their take on things, their experience, their knowledge. And I was probably the biggest student there. And it was wonderful. It was one of the greatest experiences I had.
Someone would like to know, what is the biggest regret you've had in your career, and what was your favorite project that you've worked on? So 2 parts there.
The biggest regret I had in my career was early on before I learned about leadership, this culture leadership. Before I was, as Jimmy kind of mentioned earlier, I was somebody with a big ego. And in doing so, I'd go head on with senior managers. I thought you guys don't know a damn thing about surveying. So, I kind of went alpha on them, and that was one of my biggest mistakes. Was I right on the conversations? Yes. Was I right in the arguments? Yes. Was I wrong in my approach? Absolutely. And what I learned about that is later on is that it doesn't matter what's right or wrong. It doesn't matter what's truth and not truth. If you don't have the right approach, it won't matter. The approach is probably more important than what's right or wrong. You can have the cure for cancer, but if you don't have the right approach, nobody's going to want it. And that was the biggest regret I had, but it turned out to be the biggest lesson I've learned.
My question is, out of all of your early experiences, which experience or which person had the biggest impact on who you would become as a leader?
Oh, I've had so many mentors, right? I've mentioned my dad. I mentioned the one mentor I had on the Olmsted Dam. A friend of mine who was started as my mentor got me into working on world projects. But I will say this, the biggest and greatest mentor that has shown me what culture leadership truly is my wife. She's the epitome of what culture leadership is. She's not centered. She's not a centered leader. She's in the ethos of the family. Yet because of that influence, she's our nucleus. And the thing about decentering yourself and becoming that culture leadership type, it makes you more accessible. My kids are accessible to her. I'm accessible to her. And when things get tough, she stands stalwartly and leans into it, right? And then we can all kind of lean in with her. She's that strength. And she never asks for, you know, glory. She's never asked to be put on a pedestal. She doesn't want any of that. She just wants to make sure the family's okay and the family's happy and that everything is right within the family. And so if you think of culture leadership, that's what it is. It's not about seeking glory. It's about making sure that the team is doing a great job. And it's not about, taking the credit for anything. It's about the team getting the credit, you know. So yeah, my
Like,
wife, that's my best mentor.
I truly appreciate that. I couldn't agree more. And thank you again. For everyone listening, Unwritten Records is just getting started. This is another great example of a story and a person who I felt was really needed to be shared with young surveyors. And I hope that we can continue to share these sorts of stories to uplift our profession, uplift everything about good culture, and I think that transcends beyond land surveying. So thank you again, Francisco.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank everybody for joining. And it was I'm humbled and I'm grateful for being able to talk with all of you. And I was talking to Parker earlier that it's wonderful to see this profession the way it's rising, especially with this team and this group.
and the last few couple announcements from me. If you'd like to be a part of the California Young Surveyors Network as a member or a supporting member, please sign up at our website. It's caysn.org. And if you're in San Diego, I'm building teams of leaders to help grow our local surveyors group. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to get you involved. Biggest thing here is remembering that Francisco's pre-order starts on December 8th and will run through January 9th. So follow him on LinkedIn, and that link will be there available for you. And with that, we'll see you at the next session. Wishing you all a very great, happy holiday season, and we'll catch up with you in the new year. So thank you all for your continued support, listening to Mr. Fierro's story today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.